All right, so welcome back to, I guess, video 3, but class 1, technically. Squash and stretch. So here we go. Hopefully you've got your rig set up and is good to go. It's functioning nicely. Um, we're inside the animation tab. There's lots of stuff over here we're going to cover over the course of the training. I'm not going to do an interface overview so much because we're going to stumble upon this stuff as we go. So I just figured we just get started with setting some keys. So I work in the side window a lot, and I'll be using the shortcut pie menu for that. So it's a control spacebar, and that brings it up. And we're going to go into the right view. So right off the bat, I think the default interface looks like this. So, which is nice because it's nice and open, it's nice and clean. But I do find myself wanting to access stuff through here once in a while. If you need to, it's right there. And we're definitely going to be using the graph a lot throughout this training. But for now, we don't need it. So we're going to go to frame 1. We've got to tell the computer where we want this box to be at what frame. We can divide the animation up. We have our controls to do the squishy stuff, but we also have this main control. So I'm thinking for simplicity, we'll animate the bouncing action on the main, and then we will layer the squash and stretch animation on top of that. Because if we want to adjust, say, the speed of the bounce later or the distance of the bounce, we won't have to deal with all the animation on all these curves. We'll only have to deal with this. Okay, so this scene is 96 frames. You can tell that down here. We're at 96 frames. We're going to try and play in real time and film 24 frames a second. If you wanted to change these, they're getting cut off here, but you can see down here we've got NTSC 29.7 PAL and custom ones as well if you need them. So yeah, 4-second shot. We could do a few bounces in 4 seconds. So I'm going to just bring this down. And we're going to go hit the W key to bring up your transform. Let's go set some keys. So I'm going to move this guy up here. And I am going to pop open the graph so you guys can kind of see what's going on. With the W selected, if we hit the S key, you'll see we have dropped positions at frame 0 for the main controller in space. So it says right here, we're 3.98 meters in Y, 5 meters in Z. And that's tracked there. So now we can move to frame 10. And we'll just pull this down. Now we're going to want this to be on the ground. So you might want to just go over here and just put 0. So that's perfect. So now if we scrub 0 to 1. So now we'll go to frame 20, put it up here. Now you see what's happening. You're not seeing the graphs loaded up in here. So what you're going to want to do is select this curve up here. And if you hover over it, you can see what each of these filters does. Show animated channels only, show group members, show transform channels, show item channels. So if you click on item channels, this will load up lots of stuff. Most stuff that you'll probably never use or want to set keys on, but if you want to, they're hiding in there. It just keeps this nice and clean. If you turn that off, now you can see that the keys we do have curves on, they've disappeared. If we turn this off, everything's gone. So usually I work with this one and this one. That I find to be the cleanest. So now we've got a curve in Y going down to frame 10 and up to frame 20. Hits right here and goes back up to 20. So I'm going to go to 30. I'm going to put it down. And you can see what's happening in the graph. You can see the curve is updating, which is awesome. And we're going to want this to be at 0 again, so we can hit 0. And the reason these are updating is because I've got auto key set to animated. Some people don't like working with auto key. I love auto key. If you've ever tried to work on a pose for 5 or 10 minutes and then accidentally scrubbed the timeline and lost the pose, you quickly learn the importance of the auto key. Again, some people like to do it manually. I don't. So yeah, if you want to turn that on, you can. If not, that's cool too. So this is set to auto. So we're going to go to frame 40. Put this up here. You can see what's happening. Not only is the Y key updating, but you can also see what's happening in Z. We're going from 4 meters, we've gone down to 0 meters, and now we're at negative 4 meters. And we're going to go down at 60, 70, 80, and 90. There we go. So you can see what we've got. It's nice and simple. It's kind of easy to figure out what's going on. If we go down here and scrub, wow, he's going pretty far. If we go down here and scrub, you can see what's happening. Up, down, up, down, up, down. But if you also look at the Z, you can see he's kind of speeding up, slowing down, speeding up, slowing down, speeding up, and slowing down. The easiest way to think of the graph is the steeper the curve, the faster the motion. I wish someone told me that when I was learning, because it was something that I just could not figure out. The graph is kind of a bizarre way of looking at things. It's like, what does a rotating ball look like in curves? It's weird. It takes a little while to get your head around it, but the graph is a super important diagnostic tool, and you really can't do any animation without it in 3D. I mean, it's how you tweak and fix and polish everything. Okay, so we've blocked out some basic position keys. There's nothing on our X. Here's our Y. And here's our Z. He's going a little further than I'd like to have him go, though. That's kind of, I guess it's not too bad. Okay, so what we're going to want to do is we're going to delete all these keys in the middle here. And now you'll be able to see what's happening. Moving forward, it's going to start very slow, and he's going to speed up, and he's going to ease out, come to a stop. But we're going to adjust this because this isn't really working for me. This is the one thing that computers are really good for. They're really good for hitting their poses and making perfectly smooth transitions between the keys that you set. But those perfectly smooth transitions usually make perfectly lifeless and boring animation. So we're going to fix this, and we'll be fixing pretty much all our curves to kind of make them do what we want them to. So right now all your keyframe options are over here, but they're all grayed out. So if we select one, everything becomes active. We're going to spend a lot of time in here adjusting stuff, but I'll just do a quick overview of this, and we'll keep moving. It'll tell you what frame you're on, the value of the key. We're at 5.1 meters. The slope going into the key and the weight going into the key. Now these buttons here, these are like presets for these values here. So right now, if I select both these and hit the top one, that's auto. So if you just hover over it for a second, it'll tell you what they are. There's auto, and then this one will set manual slope and weight. This sets it to manual. So with these selected, if I hit this, you'll see that these here become manual. If we go back to auto, you'll see they'll switch them to auto here. But if I grab one of these handles and start pulling it and tweaking it, you'll see that right away these switch to manual. They're getting manual slope and weight. Just undo that. Or I could just hit auto, I guess, and put it back. The next one is auto flat. And then this flat, which I use actually quite a bit. So if we go down here and just hit S, it's put in another key. So if I hit auto flat, this one, flat, it will flatten out the curve going into any key. So it's going parallel through every time. But then again, if I move the handles, you'll see that it's been set back to manual. So I could just delete that. And select this again. Go down to the next one is linear. So if I hit this, see, linear is a bit different because it's expecting values going in and out. Right? Same for the weight. The weight right now is set to auto. if I pull one of these handles, you can see that the out value of this key has been set to manual. If we select this one and hit it to linear, see it's auto. But if I pull this handle, you can see that it's now, the weighting for this one has now gone to manual because it's the weight coming into this key. There is no weight coming out of it yet, so it's set to auto. So for now, I'm going to set this back to auto. I'm just going to select this curve here and pull this down. So you can see what's going to happen in the animation. He's just going to slowly, he's going to do his thing, boing, and lose his momentum and come to a stop, rather than the ramp up and the ramp down. So now we can move on to our Y curve. So we'll go back up here, select our Y curve. Delete that. That was the key that I put on when I was messing with the Z, showing you how this works. So I put one on there, and there will be one here as well. So we can get rid of the one on the X. So here's our Y curve, and you can see not a very convincing bouncing ball. So how can we fix this? Well, we know about slope and weight, so we're going to have to go in and we're going to have to start breaking these across the bottom. But first, I'm just going to kind of make these flow off with a bit more logic. So I'm actually going to start inputting some values here. So if I select this one, I'm going to set this to 5 meters, just to give us a bit more room to work with as it decelerates. I'll set this one to 4 meters. Set this one to 3. Set this one to 2. And I'll set the last one to 1. So now we're slowly decreasing at an even pace here. Another great thing in MODO I really like is moving keys constrained to axis. So if you select a key and you want to move it, if you middle click, you can move it up and down and it'll stay on the frame you want. If you right click, it will stay constrained horizontally. Very useful. Let's undo that, get that back. Okay, so now I'm going to select all these just to make sure that they're all on 0, because right now you can see it says value mixed. So I'm going to hit 0 on this, and now we know that they're all at 0, and we can set them all to auto. Okay, so we need to break these because nothing bounces like this. Things hit the ground and they're on the ground for a millisecond and then they're gone again. So we can do this one at a time. I'll do the first one and then we'll do all the rest at the same time. Okay, so with this key selected, we're going to go in. We'll set this to linear, and you can see it's already got a nice bang in there. So we'll select these ones and we'll set these to linear as well. But not a very nice looking curve. Things don't really move like that in real life. And if you can see the kind of animation we're going to get out of this as we scrub through, it's not very organic. The timing's nice, but it's just kind of like eh. So we got to go in here and we got to adjust these curves. And we know how to do that because we know how to adjust the weights. So I'm going to pull this curve here. I'm going to pull this handle here. And you can see we're getting all manual in here now because we've used the break command with the linear to snap them. And now we're just going to put some bit more life into these arcs. We'll learn more about arcs later, but bouncing squishy box is always a good intro to arcs. There we go. There we go. Okay, so now we've kind of got some stuff blocked out, but we don't really know if this timing is working for us. So we're scrubbing it and it's going pretty good, but eventually you are going to have to do a capture of it to make sure that everything's working good. So you can access the capture tools down here. You can do preview capture, half, quarter, record GL, or to image sequence, whichever you want. Usually we just do a preview to GL. It's going to think for a second and then it'll load up the movie. So I'll just move this over here. We can just hit play. So I'm pretty happy with that. That timing's good enough. So now we can start layering in some of the squash. All right, so our bouncing's done. Let's start layering some squishiness on top of this box. So first thing we need to do is we need to select our curves. And as you can see, nothing's showing up anywhere. If you open up the item list, you can see that they're selected, but nothing's showing up here, and that's because we haven't set any keys on them. So with them selected, if I hit the W key and hit S, you'll see that it's added keyframes to the position for all of these. If I hit the E key and switch to rotation mode and hit S, it'll add rotation values. But you don't have to do this with the hotkey S. I mean, if you want to, you can come down here and you can click right here as well. And that'll also set values across the board at frame 1. So right now we know that everything at frame 1 is keyed. So we're going to go down to here. This is our first squash position. So I'm going to select the middle key, I'm going to pull this down a little bit, and I'm going to scale it out. And you can see what's happened is it hasn't keyed everything, right? Because I've only keyed the translate and the scale, so the rotate didn't get any channels, right? So what we want to do to make sure we're always keying everything and not leaving anything behind, we'll hit this key here. And for this one, you can see everything's green now. If I pull it down and hit S, you can see it's doing, not sure why it's doing Z. We'll hit S. I guess I nudged it a bit. But nothing else is getting keyed. But that's not good. So we want to key that as well. And even though we haven't put any values on this bottom one, I'm going to key this as well. So now, if I select all three, just with the shift, 2, 3. Got them all here. Yep. Everything's keyed, and we're going from a little wide. So we're going from here and hitting our squash pose here. But this is kind of lame because the squash is starting up in the sky, which doesn't really work for us. That's not what we're going for. So what you want to do is if you middle click and drag from frame 1, our default position, you'll see you get this little green marker here. Now if you hit the red key, you'll set a key. You basically dragged this position, all the keyframe data, from here and pasted it here. So if you look in the graph, you can see what's happening. It's holding its position, and then it starts to do the squash. So between 0, nothing, 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 and now it's going to hit. But even that is still wrong. So we should adjust that. Another great thing I love about MODO is the dope sheet. While you can access it through here, this will give you all your keys, and you can adjust them individually. I rarely find myself coming in here, because if you drag up your timeline, you get it right here. It takes a little bit away from your screen, but it hasn't really bugged me that much. So now, with all this stuff selected, if I hit frame 5 here of the dope sheet, you can see what's happening. It's taking all these curves and sliding them. You do have this functionality here, but for some reason I just like it over the timeline. Again, just a preference. So as this comes down, it's squashing, and that's no good. So I'm thinking it should probably be in this position right before it hits, a frame before. So we'll drag this to frame 9. Bam. So now nothing. Bam. And then the frame after, we're going to want it to kind of spring back into position. And by the time we get up here to frame 20, we're definitely going to want to be back in our default position. So again, with everything selected, we could just go back to frame 1 because we already have this position. Middle click and drag to frame 20 and key it. So now it's going bang. And then slowly back to, wait a minute. Oh, sorry. I don't have them selected. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So we'll take this and key. There we go. Beautiful. So now we'll go boom. Now we're going to go up and back to our default position. Bang, default position. But even that's a little bit lifeless because it's hitting and then coming back in this weird kind of egg shape, which isn't very interesting. So probably right after this pose, we might want to maybe pull this one down a bit. Hit the W key. Push this one up a bit. And push this one up a bit. And again, select these. Make sure we got them all. Hit S. Or key them here. So now we'll hit. Boom. Bang. Everything's getting keyed all the time. You always key everything. You can always do your offsets and stuff later, but you always want all the keys of everything moving at the same time. You don't want to leave anything behind. So now we've got this right before it hits. We got bang into the hit and then pops out, and then it's going to settle back up into our default position. And that's working pretty good. A lot of impact. There we go. So we could probably do a blast of that just to see what's happening. So record OpenGL to movie. Let's see how it looks. So we can abort that because I don't want to see the whole thing. I just want to see the beginning. Pretty cool. So now, with all this stuff selected here, we've already done the animation, and I don't want to key this. I don't want to key all this again. I got stuff to do. So we can take this whole thing here, select all of this, Control C. Now it's going to come down. Actually, we'll take it from before the hit, not this one. We'll just take this chunk here. Control C. We know we hit on frame 30, but we know our first keyframe is at frame 9. So now we'll go to frame 29. We'll hit V. So it's going to go up and bang again. It's going to do the exact same animation again. It's going to go up again. And so 49, V again. Bang. We'll stretch it again. Bang. Pop out again. There you go. So we've got our squashes in. And we're done! Except for the fact that all these squashes have this huge intensity to them. And that really wouldn't happen because he's not falling from as big a distance. The speed is slowing down. The height of the jumps is slowing down. So naturally, the scale and the amount of stretch should also be scaling down. So we'll go into, do this one first. The position Y, you can see how it goes in. It hits, bang, it goes down, bang, it goes down. It's a bit much, so I'm going to raise, if you right click, whoop, sorry, wrong one, middle click and drag up. This is what I was talking about earlier. See, we can raise this and raise this one and raise that one. So now you can see every time he comes down, it's a little bit less squash. And at the end, there's barely any. And the bottom, we've got this big stretch here in the Y position. That works for number 1. And we'll put number 2, we'll push it up a little bit. Number 3, we'll push it up. And number 4, we'll push it up more. So now, there we go. But the scale is still pretty huge, so we'll select all our scale channels. You can see right before we hit, there's nothing, and then bang, there's our scale right here, which works for frame 1, but again, we got to tone this down, so we'll scale that in, and scale this in. So the last one we'd have to fix is the top, because this is popping way too much now. So number 1, if we go select our position Y, pull this one down, this one, this one. Even them out a bit so they lose energy. It's tough keeping them in frame here. There we go. But even his squash still, see when he hits on the first one, he goes down a lot, but he's still going down the same amount for every one. So we really got to tweak this one too. Put that up, and almost none on the last one. So now he's boom, 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 boom. And just for good measure, because we got a little bit left here at the end, we could key this one. Hit the S. I'll key all that. Just put it, where's he land? Here. Yeah, so we'll just put at 92. Just translate it down a little bit. And then up to 95. Put it back. Maybe throw a little bit of scale in, just a tiny bit. And then we'll do the same with this. When it hits, hit S on 90. Pull it down a little bit. And then back up for 95. So we could do a preview GL of that. There you go. So you may want to have another view to work in. We're a little bit pulled out right now. A lot of times I'll split this viewport. So if you control and pull, swipe to the right, you can get yourself another viewport up here. And then again, control spacebar, you can get your perspective, or if you want to work through your camera view, which is usually what you want to do. Let's say we want them jumping towards us. There we go. Another thing you may want to do is you may find this workspace to be a little cramped, and you may want to put your graph on another monitor. So if you go down to Palettes and hit Graph Editor, you'll get a big full screen graph like this. And when I first started using MODO, I used this actually quite a lot because this is how I was used to working in other programs. I'd have a huge graph on one screen, and I did all my work over there. But I've noticed since I started working in MODO, I don't really do this anymore. I mean, I haven't needed the huge graph. I mean, it's just the way I was used to working. I've found that for the most part, this is actually working pretty good. And I had to go back and do another job in Maya recently, and I was actually annoyed by having my monitor on my graph on the other monitor, because I kind of felt like I was playing tennis. There's a lot of back and forth that I didn't really notice before. So I've actually become quite a fan of having all this stuff here and all these controls right here. If you don't want to work in this, like I said, all the same things are right here. All your slope and weight tools are all across the top here. All your presets for your keys are here. Keyframe buttons, interpolation, all the same stuff. So I guess it just depends on how you like to work. But so far, I'm digging it. So in closing, I just wanted to mention a few things. Animation is a slow process. It takes a long time. And I think in the beginning, I think it's discouraging to a lot of people that try it for the first time because of how slow it can be. But to give you a little perspective, most of the studios I've worked at had a quota between 30 and 45 seconds a week. I've had to deliver as much as a minute and as little as 17 seconds. Feature film animators typically have way smaller quotas, but they have to deliver at much higher level. So don't get discouraged if you end up working for a few days on 150 frame shot with only one character in it. That's completely normal.